Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we have got an incredible show today because we have a fantastic woman on who has had a loss of a child and some health issues, and has come on to join us to talk about what she's learned in her journey. So would you like to introduce her, Heidi?
Sure, Mom. And like you said, we're going to be talking today about standing strong through stillbirth and cancer. And our guest is Katie Joy Duke. Katie is a writer, mindset coach for women, transformational speaker, and a mom of two daughters, one living and one in spirit. She practiced social justice law for 9 years before her daughter Poppy was stillborn at full term in 2015. And she's written the best-selling memoir, Still Breathing, My Journey with Love Loss and Reinvention. Welcome to our show, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Katie, you're quite an inspiration to me because, first of all, the idea that you had a stillbirth child, which we know at full term is such a huge thing. And I think it gets unacknowledged, don't you, Heidi?
Absolutely. I hear women all the time, and I've had 2 miscarriages, but I hear women that have had stillbirth say that people say to them, and it'll be interesting to get your weigh in on this, at least you could get pregnant, at least they died suddenly, at least you didn't know her better, at least you're still young, at least you can have other children, all these at least, and at least tend to minimize our losses. And I'm thinking that it's been disenfranchised in many ways.
I do think that is true. And that is one of the main reasons why I decided to tell my story and to write the book. It was to bring more awareness to an issue that so many mothers and parents and fathers deal with every single year. There are 24,000 babies stillborn in the United States every single year. And
wow.
For your audience, stillbirth is considered anything after 20 weeks of gestation, a pregnancy that ends after 20 weeks of gestation. And I was in labor when I found out I was pregnant. And there are so many of us that go through that type of loss. And, one thing that I like to remember, or I had to keep reminding myself as I worked on my memoir, because it took me 6 years to finish, was my why and who I was really writing the book for. I dedicated the book to my daughters, but who I was writing the book for was anyone that had gone through a loss like that. And by the time by the time my book was published, simple math, it had been like 150,000 more mothers. Right.
Wow. So Katie, you were giving birth to Poppy thinking that you were going to have a daughter that was going to live, right?
Well, I had gone into labor on my due date, which was October 25th of 2015. And I labored into the night, and then I got the green light to go into the hospital, and my husband and I arrived ready to, like you said, ready to meet our baby girl. The car seat was in the back, the nursery was done, everything,
Wow.
We'd had baby showers, like all of that. And
you were ready to bring her home.
Absolutely. And that's when the nurse who was attending us at the time said that we're going to monitor her heartbeat for a little while to see how she's responding to the contractions. And that's when we found out she didn't have a heartbeat anymore. So it was very devastating.
Now, tell me, one of the things that you say is that it transformed your life, and in a positive way, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was on a path, right? We all are, whether it's not the right one, it's not the wrong one. I was practicing law. I'd become a lawyer. I was very, achievement based. I was basically like stripped away of everything that I thought was going to happen. Everything, all of my expectations were just ripped away at the last minute. And I ended up leaving my career as an attorney. Not necessarily because I wanted to, but because I really couldn't focus. I really couldn't continue doing that type of work. I was a disability lawyer and I tried to go back to work. And it was very interesting because my clients, in many ways at that point, I felt like were messengers. They were almost like angels because they had become disabled essentially due to a combination of things that had happened in their lives. And I could see my future in them if I didn't stop and slow down and take care of myself and really dive in spiritually to the lessons that I felt intuitively I was given the opportunity to learn through this loss. And because I was always a writer, but I hadn't ever published anything. But because I processed through journaling, I immediately dove into journaling and then eventually using my laptop to capture my thoughts and feelings. And what started as, love letters essentially to my daughter who passed away eventually became this story that I can now share with the world.
Now, talk about spirituality. You grew spiritually.
I definitely sought out community, and my husband and I went to a support group for a while. I think a lot of it was me tapping into tools and practices that I'd had, yoga, meditation, breath work, that sort of thing, that even the journaling, tapping into a relationship with a higher power, with God, with source, praying for understanding, desperately wanting to know what happens to a soul when a body passes on. There was always sort of that connection that I had, and going through a loss like this definitely had me reconnect with that internal sense of wisdom that I believe is a spark that we all have within us, right? Whether we're religious or not. What happened for me is right after Poppy died, I felt a very tangible sense that she was with me because she had been, like she had grown
Right.
inside of me, and then she was born. I got to hold her. We were connected. And then, her body was cremated and we had her ashes, and we did very beautiful ritualistic things with some of her ashes. We sprinkled them in Hawaii and in the Grand Canyon. We did so many beautiful things to memorialize her. But as time moved on and sort of, I will say, like the real depression of the loss started to sink in, because, there's the shock and you're just like, you don't even really like know how to deal with like what actually just happened to me. Once the depression really started to sink in, I noticed that I felt very disconnected from her. And what I intuited and sort of the messages that I received was, well, Katie, that's your responsibility. If you want a connection with her, it's my responsibility to cultivate and create that. And so I did that. And so I started very intentionally meditating with her, calling in that energy, believing that she was with me, feeling her, looking for signs, asking for signs, receiving the messages. And slowly that, I think that for me was a huge part of my healing, because there was a point at which I felt like she went from being my baby. At some point I realized, gosh, she's not a baby anymore. She's this light. She is God, right? She is source energy. She is pure. She is, and by giving myself the freedom to tap into that, then it was like, oh my goodness. Then I really started to understand the opportunity and the possibility of having been chosen by her spirit, by her soul, to be her mother and to carry her message and her legacy into the world. What was such a devastating loss, I was open to hope, right? Like I was really open to the possibility of what this could do for my life. And I don't ever want to underestimate how awfully difficult it was. I mean, it was so hard. And anyone who reads my book will get a sense of that. I do not sugarcoat anything.
Well, Katie, you're making a good point, because what you're doing with yourself and with others is we have to acknowledge and validate the loss first and be in the pain and take the journey before we can start to move into being open to hope.
Absolutely.
Fast forward, you get your book finished.
She would be 7. She just would have turned 7 this last October. Yeah.
And you turn in your manuscript for the book about her, and you are diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer.
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. This past February, I was reading stories to my now 5-year-old Moxie, our rainbow. And yeah, my hand just fell on my left breast as I was reading stories there on my side, and I felt a lump. And it was one of those things where I was just like, was that your yesterday? So I did eventually, I got my first ever mammogram. I was 41 at the time. I knew my body, and I trusted that intuition that said, this is not right. This is not normal. There's something going on here. So this year has been an unbelievable. One of the things I mentioned earlier was like, I never questioned so hard where a soul goes when it dies, or what happens to a soul. Before Poppy died, and then Poppy died, and I was like, where is my baby? Like, where did, what happened to her? And then I got this diagnosis, and I tell you what, I have had to face my own mortality, in ways at this tender age of now 42, I would have never, ever imagined.
And how has your journey through Poppy's death helped you to cope with what's going on now?
My father also passed away in February of 2019. So after Poppy died, a few years later, he died of prostate cancer. And I write about this in my book, but when I called my husband to tell him that my dad had in fact died, he had this moment of clarity. My husband did, where he says, Katie, I can see them together. I can see them there together. And I'm like, what? I don't know what you're talking about, and he said, Poppy was there to greet your daddy. But I bring all that up to say that I had this very tender experience with myself this past year when I was, bald and no eyelashes and no eyebrows and, full of poison from the chemotherapy that I was dealing with. And it struck me, wait a second, if I choose to believe that my father and Poppy are somehow there together in whatever this after place is or experience, then that means that when I die, I get to meet her again too. I get to meet him again too. I get to be a part of that. Like, in other words, that like, I'm not excluded from all this. Like, if, like whatever happens on the other side of this, I'm okay with it. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm at peace with the idea that this physical experience that I've been given is an experiment, that God truly has given me the opportunity to just come and be in this body and go through all of the emotions and all of the ups and downs and all of the sorrow and all of the joy and all of the hope and all of the possibility, and just to do the best that I can with it while I can. I'm just going to keep appreciating as much of it as I can while I still have the chance to do it, while I have the chance to be alive.
I love it. I just wanted to give our audience 4 points. They're your points, and I'm just going to read them because I think they're so lovely. And one of them is that after Poppy's death, you grew spiritually. You learned to sit with uncertainty. You were no longer afraid to talk about death, and you could hold space for others. And I want to say this, you have really held space for us today.
Oh, thank you
for doing this. You are a lovely soul.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And tell our audience where they can get your book and your website and any information that you'd like people to know.
Sure, absolutely. So my website is katiejoyduke.com. That's my full name. And you can order, if you'd like, a personally signed copy of the paperback there from my website. I've got books here at home, and I'll sign it to you or to anyone that you want and mail it off special. You can also order it on Amazon in paperback and ebook. I am recording an audiobook, and then if you'd like to follow me on social media, I'm Katie Joy Duke on Instagram and Facebook, and you're welcome to follow along my journey. I like sharing myself in that way with people, and authenticity is my number one value, and laughter is the best medicine.
I just wanted to say that I love that your middle name is Joy, because you've certainly lived up to that and shown us that despite great adversity and loss, you can find joy again. So
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. My parents did a good job.
And thanks everyone for joining us on this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.